Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be back at Giant again this year. And I was really pleased to see the focus on surgical technology earlier today with a discussion led by Shafi. And because this is an area that we've been focusing on at GJE from an IP perspective this year. As Shafi alluded to then, I've done enough of these talks to know that it can be difficult sometimes to get across some of these IP issues in an engaging way, even to an IP audience sometimes. But my challenge for this talk is to try and convince you that there's some real issues here that need to be looked at in surgical innovation. So to briefly introduce myself, my name's Jack Severs. I'm a UK and European patent attorney at GJE. We're a specialist IP law firm based here in London, offices also in Munich. I work across the full range of different health technologies, particularly with early stage companies, helping them to get an IP strategy in place to protect their innovation. But we have been focusing particularly over the last year or so on surgical innovation. I'll just give a bit of background to that. So, although we work across all fields of health technology, we periodically review the field in general to identify key innovation growth areas, and surgical technology is one of those areas that we've identified, particularly the application of digital technologies such as surgical robotics, navigation systems, VR and AR, and applications of machine learning, which we refer to as subsectors of computer-aided surgery. And as well as there being a lot of growth in innovation in these areas, there are some real issues with IP protection in this area. So we've produced this report for any innovators in surgical technology to help guide them through the process. So the aims of the report really are to present our findings into the current innovation landscape in surgical technology, explain the latest developments in terms of patent law and how we see this could be holding back innovation to some extent, and also provide some practical guidance to ensure that innovators can achieve the broadest protection and actually go on and commercialize these technologies. So, firstly, how do you measure innovation? It's a difficult thing to measure. One way is to look at the number of patents that are being filed. And I usually have this slide at the beginning of my talks to say, there are more patents being filed for medical technology than any other. Actually, last year, it was pushed into a close second place. But still, for 9 of the last 10 years, there have been more patents filed for medical and health technology than any other field, showing the level of innovation in the sector. But what about computer-aided surgery in particular? So what this graph shows is that actually patent filings have absolutely taken off in computer-aided surgery over the last 10 years, illustrating this rapid pace of innovation. We've also identified some key subsectors. So the green bars here illustrate the patent filings for computer-aided simulation and modeling. The black bars, surgical navigation systems, the orange, surgical robotics. And you can see that particularly for robotics and navigation systems, these fields have really taken off in terms of patent filing. So there's a lot of innovation activity going on. But in addition to that, you could see from that graph that around these filings really only started around 20 years ago, which means that those initial broad patents, which were potentially holding back innovation, are now beginning to expire, opening the door to a new generation of companies. So patents only last 20 years. You can see that those early broad patents are now dropping out, meaning there's real opportunities out there for innovation in this area. The other thing that I've mentioned is that there's a clear shift in innovation from traditional hardware towards software. But what this brings is a number of real challenges from an IP perspective that we are helping our clients with. So the two questions that I want to answer is why is IP important to innovation in surgical technology, and what are the challenges? Well, this is one illustration of why IP is important. This data is taken from a report by economists at the European Patent Office that looked at the performance of a huge number of small and medium-sized enterprises across Europe and looked at their use of the IP system. And what they found is that those companies actively using the IP system were much more likely to be high-performing companies, so to be high-growth companies. And that effect was even more pronounced for companies that were using the full range of IP rights. So this really demonstrates a correlation between the proper use of the IP system and the growth of these companies. Now, so why is IP important, particularly to surgical technology? Well, it facilitates growth. It gives investors the confidence to support the company and a new technology. So it's needed to accelerate the widespread growth of these new surgical techniques that could do so much good. I think IP is also kind of seen as a necessary evil in a lot of fields, particularly in medical and health technologies. But I would also point out that it also fosters collaboration. When it gives collaborators the confidence to work together, knowing that their contributions are protected, it can actually help innovation. And that's, you can see that in the standard system for telecoms, where you have these big companies working together to create the technology that will set the latest standards. And it's the same in surgical technology. So without getting into the real nitty-gritty of some of the IP law, there are real challenges with this area. It falls at the intersection of a number of complex and changing areas of patent law. So I'm not sure how many of you are aware of the fact that actually methods of treatment by surgery are excluded from patent protection. You can't get a patent for a method of treatment by surgery. But there's also other restrictions on certain types of software inventions. There's restrictions on protecting mathematical methods, which are relevant to AI, and also the presentation of information, which are relevant to some of these guidance systems, so these AR and VR guidance systems. So I'm going to talk about just the first one in a bit more detail, because that's where we've seen some real changes, and I just don't think that these changes have really been recognized enough amongst the IP profession and are not being communicated to their clients, which in our view is actually holding back innovation. And we're seeing companies developing new surgical technologies that just aren't getting the breadth of protection that they should be. So this is an example of European patent law. There are similar provisions in other countries, but you can see there it says European patents shall not be granted in respect of methods of treatment of the human body by surgery. There are clear public policy reasons for this, because you don't want surgeons to be restricted by IP law in treating their patients. But it's important to note that this only applies to methods, so not to devices. So you can get protection for surgical devices. So, for example, you can't get protection for a new method of forming an incision, but you can get a claim to a robot configured to perform that type of incision. So the key point is the exclusion is on patenting methods of treatment by surgery, not devices. But what about software? As I've said, we've seen this big shift towards software implemented techniques for performing surgery. Where does that fall? Well, there's actually a lot of uncertainty over whether you can protect these type of techniques, particularly in Europe. The guidelines from the European Patent Office say that that should be fine to protect medical devices, computer programs, which comprise subject matter corresponding to a method of surgery. But actually, we've identified recent case law which is showing that this isn't always the case, and surgical companies developing these new surgical technologies are actually getting refused for these reasons. So the key points for innovators protecting surgical technology, how should they respond? Well, I just want to make clear that strong patent protection in these areas is still possible, but you really need to take care when preparing these applications. As I say, I think there's a lot of patent attorneys out there who haven't really recognized these changes in the law. So the key considerations are protect the hardware if possible. If you're trying to protect the software, avoid claiming steps specifically relating to surgical steps performing on the body, and try to frame in the patent application the advantages in terms of the non-therapy advantages. So, for example, improve precision in the control of a robotic arm rather than a patient-focused advantage, faster healing of an incision. Now, these are points that really your IP advisor should be following, but as I say, I just don't think they're being recognized at the level they should be, so do push them on this if they haven't brought them up. So, as I say, we produced this white paper which goes into a lot more detail and provides practical guidance in providing, obtaining protection in this area across some of these key areas: robotics, navigation systems, machine learning, AR, VR. We've seen a lot of applicants who are just not obtaining the protection they should be obtaining because of these restrictions and a lack of appreciation for some of this detail. So if you're interested, please do get in contact and we can give you a copy of the white paper. Just a bit to touch on GJE and the health and medtech team more generally. I've been speaking today about surgical innovation, but as I say, we work across all types of health technology. We work with health and medtech companies themselves to help them assess their innovation, come up with an IP strategy to protect their innovation, provide recommendations, and ultimately obtain the IP rights for them. But we also work with investors on assessing the IP portfolios of investment targets, assessing the risks, providing recommendations to mitigate those risks. So, and of course, that work with investors helps feed back into the advice we can give to companies who are preparing for investment, because we're used to working with investors to see the kind of issues that they're looking at. We have particular products that we use to structure some of this work. So innovation capture sessions for early stage companies looking to capture their IP. IP audits for more established companies who want to review the IP they have and see if it's actually still of value or if it's just draining resources. And IP due diligence for investors. And of course, those products aren't just focused on surgical technology, but on the broader range of health technologies. We're still here at the conference. We've got an exhibition stand downstairs. We'll be there until later this afternoon. If you haven't already spoken to us, please do come by. We're also offering free IP consultations to anyone that is interested and wants to discuss their IP or has any specific queries. Not sure if you'll be able to get the QR code to work, but you can just come up and speak to us at our stand, and we'd be happy to talk to you. Thanks a lot for listening.
Thank you. Jack, time for one question for you.
Go on then.
Any questions from the audience? I've got a question. Has Brexit changed anything for us in terms of patent laws?
Not in terms of patent laws, not at all. And that's actually something that we need to try and get across better to clients. So the European patent system is completely separate to the EU. The UK is still very much part of that patent system, so it really doesn't change anything from a patent perspective at all. Despite some of our competitors in Germany and other countries trying to suggest that it does, but no, it doesn't change anything from a patent perspective.
Right, that's really, I didn't understand that. That's great to clarify. Any other questions? If not, thanks, Jack, for coming every year to support us. Hopefully some of the startups will come to you for advice.
Yes.
And hopefully we'll see how that transpires. And I've seen CMR have so many patents in robotics, right?
They do.
In fact, they put up your whole graph, right?
Yeah, even CMR, though, we've looked at some of their applications and they're struggling to get the protection that they really should be. So, I'm not sure their advisors are really kind of quite up to date with some of these issues.
They come to GJE now?
Well, they should do.
Jack, thank you so much.
Thanks a lot. Cheers.